because what all of this is about, what defining ourselves as Indian or Native or Lakota or Two-Spirit, or our traditional word for it, which is Wingte, is a whole nother thing. It's about identity. And I think that each person, of course, struggles with identity. That's part of being a human being. We do have the strength of our cultures there, and we do have a responsibility to those cultures, and we're taught that often from a very young age, which is why it's so thrilling to be a part of this organization, the Northeast Two-Spirit Society. As Ben and Nick pointed out, I was around towards the end of Wiwa Barchayampi in the early 90s. And the coming back now to NE2SS, to me, seems like a very natural, organic process, because despite the problems we may have had, you know, in our cultures, this is what happens. You know, we rebirth ourselves, we come back, we move on, and it's intergenerational. You know, there's those of us on this panel here who have been around the city for a long time and know our history as a Native community in an urban center. I think it's also important to point out what Nick or Ben, I forget which one, but was talking about the boarding schools and the, you know, we suffer as a part of our identity from intergenerational trauma and post-traumatic stress trauma, which I think we often see working, but we sort of forget that in our communities. And I think it's really important to begin to acknowledge that that exists. Colonization is a very evil thing. When you take a people's culture and spirituality and language from them and the way they interact with each other, there is going to be genetic memory of that. I'm a firm believer in genetic memory. That's why I suspect my grandmother of being a Nazi, but that's another and that has affected our communities, and being a part of any organization, whether it's Two-Spirit or Human Rights, I work with 2,000 indigenous people from around the world, you see the issues on a day-to-day basis. But what's important is that we still keep coming together as a community.
So much talk of identity, I think that does bring it to the perfect question, first question, which is, what is your definition of Two-Spirit? We can just go down the line and give your dash.
First of all, I don't use that term Two-Spirit. I use the term Twin Spirit, because I believe we all have a two spirits within us, male and female. It's just a matter of finding the balance of who we are as individuals. I've been out since I was, 19, 20, so I've been out 28 years. You know, I have seen all the phases of all the things going on in our community. But I think because I'm so out and loud and proud, no one's really said nothing to my face. I've been out there when we do ceremonies and we do different things, or I'm at different Indian gatherings. Elders have recognized, you know, where I am in terms of our culture. I spoke at Indian health events, and when I speak about Two-Spirit and the identity of who we are in the gay community and within our own Indian community, you'll get the religious people like Kevin's talking about that'll be like, oh no, that's so wrong. And then you'll get the older Indians who are like in their 70s, 80s, and they'll be like, no, what she's talking about is true. You know, they've always been a part of our culture, they've always been a part of our society. What we believe in, you know, the Creator makes no mistakes. And so who we are meant to be is who we are meant to be. And so most of our people, you know, that aren't trapped by the religion, you know, they understand that this is just who we are. I mean, if you were born a girl and you want to do boy stuff, then that's just who you are. You're a boy and want to play with dolls, that's who you are, you know. Nobody makes fun of you. But then when you got the religion in there, then it all comes in and, you know, starts changing the dynamics of our culture. So we're not only as Two-Spirit or Twin-Spirit, whatever you want to call yourself, you know, we're not only having to remind, you know, our own community and the gay community, but we're having to remind our own culture, you know, who have forgotten who we are. You know, so that's one of the biggest problems is, you know, is this whole movement is trying to bring it back to our own communities and remind them that, you know, this isn't something new. I mean, we've been here since the beginning of time. You know, I don't want to go into my creation story, but our creation story for our tribe starts off with a hermaphrodite. Yeah. Starts off with someone who is of male and female, and 2 people called her sons, which weren't really her sons, it was 2 boys, you know. But that part of our creation story got cut off, the very beginning part. Now it just comes down to, you know, 2 boys, and, you know, they cut out the hermaphrodite part. They cut out, you know, that it was basically a gay creation story in a sense.
Two-spirit to me is sort of a symbol. It's an agreed upon term that came out of, I think it's around 1990, 1992 or something like that. It's agreed upon term, a symbol for each individual tribe's name for their alternate gender queer people. And rather than say, you know, because we call it Native American, we, you know, group it all together rather than having to say Wingte, Nadle, Jotis, we say Two-Spirit. And I think that that's something that people need to understand.
Two-Spirit basically means that I said it was culturally bound, tribally bound, in a historical sense. And that, that if the tribe was supportive of this construct of, you know, a traditional Two-Spirit, then it could proceed and to develop in a healthful manner. So, and if the tribe, so each Two-Spirit tribe is going to have a different version of a Two-Spirit, just as you see up here. And I think that people who want to borrow from it should borrow from it. But also, again, to honor your own ethnicity before that, because as I read the article that's on the website, and he says something about labels, you know, and so wearing a label of, if you're not from a tribe, then, you know, can you really say you're Two-Spirit? That's a good question. So I'm not going to answer that question for you because I don't have the answer. And I think the answer is, I don't have the answer, but I think it's a question that we will all continue to ponder. It's an evolving process. It's continuing to emerge. And as it expresses it in ourselves, maybe we can be role models for you, that you in turn can be role models for others, because we didn't have any. We didn't have them.
Homophobia comes from, like, the female looking at a Two-Spirit woman would be very attracted to the male spirit, yet at the same time not really feel comfortable because they're not attracted to women. They're really attracted to the male spirit in that woman. And it's the same thing for the male. It's a little more dramatic with the male, you know, like big queen, you know, straight guys love the big queen. But it's the same dynamic where, you know, this whole transgender identity that is now coming out in society is, in a way, to the root of the matter. That sometimes the creator knows what is needed in society, and what I think is that the males and females that are heterosexual struggle and suffer because they are so serious about their own identities, and they need other ways, and they need to see that other people can be free, and that, you know, that's the way it was described to me. I was very fortunate because in South Dakota, nobody cares. If you call somebody a Wingte, they're like, oh yeah, that's right. You know, like, it's considered an asset. And it comes down to our traditional, tribal traditions. Like, we were never told to go and live in the gay camp. We were like, oh, stay here and watch the kids. Teach them how to speak English. You know, like, here, you make this dress, or whatever. Like, we were incorporated as a part of the unit. We have a very extended family system where I'm from, which can be very confusing because I grew up with all these cousins, and everybody was a brother or a sister, and, you know, auntie. So we have a different family dynamic, but in that, the gays were always welcome. That was never the issue. What the issue is, are you going to act white, or are you going to be Indian? So for me, especially with my mother being white, the racism was more traumatic than any of the sexual problems. Like, for me, being gay was like a walk in the park. Because, yeah, because when you go to a white town and you watch people follow your father around the store, I mean, it's just like, when you experience it, like, people think racism is like this dynamic in society, but they don't realize it's happening to a person. And other people are doing it to a person. And that person is either gonna get a cup of coffee and go on, or just, like, fight about it. And, you know, those are the kind of things that, for me, were more apparent than the whole gay thing.